Welcome to the Power of Purity podcast, the show that empowers men to experience their sexual gift in a healthier way. Now here's your host, Tony Ingrassia.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Power of Purity podcast. I'm glad you could join us for this episode. And I'm really excited about this episode because I have a very special guest with me today, somebody that I've known for several years, and his name is Kris Bishop. And Kris has had quite a journey in his own life, in his marriage, and even in the sexual journey of his life. So welcome, Kris. I'm glad you're here today.
Thanks, Tony. It's great to be here.
And just so everybody knows, in the interest, I guess, of complete transparency, we're not strangers. We've known each other for several years, and we know each other in the church context, and I consider you a friend.
Absolutely. Same here.
And, of course, as we've gotten to know each other, we've learned more and more about each other's story, and I feel like we've kind of been on a journey together the past couple years. And what God has done in your heart, in your life, in your marriage, and even in your sexuality, I feel like we could call it a miracle. And I think you guys, you have something to share with others.
Yeah, God, there's no doubt that God's worked a miracle in my life and in my marriage.
Praise God. So let's start with having you just share a little bit about yourself, about your family, your kids, just a little bit so people have a little sense of your life.
Okay. I was, I've got a brother who's just a couple years younger than me, and a wife and 4 beautiful children. We had our family pretty young, so I'm about 36, and my oldest is getting ready to start driving here. So life's busy and fun, and I feel pretty blessed.
Praise God. And how long have you and Jamie been married?
We got married back in 1999, so we'll be coming up on 17 years if I'm doing the math right.
Wow, 17 years, that's correct. And what do you do for a living?
Couple different. I part owner of a company called Innovative Claim Service, and I own another business called Bishop Custom Solutions. So one business I work in insurance, another I do computer programming.
Awesome. Okay. Well, how long ago would you say that we met?
It was 2012.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it was 3 or 4 years, so somewhere in the range of 4 years or so.
Yeah, it was definitely February of 2012, if I'm not mistaken. So, just a little over 4 years.
Okay. And why don't you just talk about the circumstances that brought our lives together? I remember, from my point of view, we were hosting a Power of Purity conference at our little church, the Outpost Church, and you came to sit in on that conference. And through a series of events, I had talked to Jamie, even though I didn't know you guys, had never met you guys. We had some ladies that were going to be helping with the conference, serving food for lunch and everything. The conference was for men, but I invited her to come if she wanted to come to help the ladies. And she said she would like that. So I remember you guys coming in the very first time I saw you, the very first time I met you. But kind of what was going on that brought you to that day?
Yeah, I mean that's part of our miracle, actually. Jamie had just come home to me not long before that. We had been looking for some Christian counseling, things of that nature, just because she had come back home, and we wanted to really work on us. And I was our lives had been a mess for many, many years, and I had an addiction to pornography that was really taxing on our marriage, and bottom line is we were ready for something new, and I could not get a single Christian counselor to call us back. It was crazy because I had left voicemails for I don't know 4 or 5 different people, and just no call back. I didn't know what was going on with that. And Jamie was told by a friend that I think used to go to church with you years ago or something of that nature, that you were putting on this conference. And so we were like, we didn't have a lot of money, but we were like, well, let's check it out. And you were like, for the first, I think it was the first time you'd ever done it free of charge, if I'm not mistaken. There was no admission. And we were like, oh, well, we can afford free. and so so I was going to go to the conference. Jamie was just like, you need this. And so that was the thought. And then when she had called you just to find out some more about it and get some details, she remembers you saying, I don't normally invite women to the conference, but we're going to have a few people downstairs. So would you like to come along? And that was just kind of another miracle, because that was very significant in my wife's life as well. So as we both came to that, I remember just sitting there that day. Like I said, Jamie had recently come home. I was in a place where I was ready for change, ready for something new, but didn't know what it looked like. And I was so encouraged hearing your story, because that was a big part of what you share in the conference, is what God's done in your life. I felt like for so many years I've confessed to other men, and we've talked, and it's like, okay, yeah, we both struggle, but we were both still in the mess. You are one of the first men that I've ever met that could say that he was on the other side of the mess, that God had brought him through it. And so there was just something about that alone that was incredibly encouraging. Almost like it is possible. So with God, all things are possible. At the same time, you look and man after man after man is stuck in the same place. It starts to make you scratch your head.
Right.
So like I said, that was just incredibly encouraging. I started listening to the things you had to share, and some of the techniques and just different things that God had done in your life, and I just began to experience more and more hope. Meanwhile, my wife, who was sitting downstairs, was going through the exact same thing, even internally in her heart, just God was working on her big time.
Praise God. I think even though the women weren't in the auditorium for the conference that day, we have a feed into the basement, and the sessions were on, so Jamie was able to see on the screen what was being taught and hear the material, so she was being exposed to everything that was being said.
Absolutely. Right.
And I'm not sure, but I think she met a couple other women that day and was able to share a little bit, and they shared with her. And I don't know, I just feel like it was a very strategic day. God knew exactly what he was doing, and he brought you guys there, and it was intended by God all along.
Yeah, there was no doubt in our minds that God led us there. He's the one who, through a friend, told us about it. He's the one who orchestrated for us to make sure we were there, that finances didn't get in the way, that Jamie got invited along. And then the real, just to top it all off, when it was all done and we found out that you were actually a counselor as well, there was no doubt in our mind that one of the reasons I hadn't gotten a call back was God knew who he had picked out for us.
Praise
we just
God.
hadn't met him yet.
I love when you just have a sense of God's fingerprints on your life, and things are unfolding and working in such a way that it can't be a coincidence, and you just have a sense, holy cow, God is present in this, and I think God's doing something. So that's awesome.
Absolutely.
But when you were sharing there, Kris, you mentioned that leading up to that day, Jamie had just come home, you said. And that implies that Jamie was not at home. You guys were actually separated. So what led to that separation? What was going on in your lives and in your marriage that you came to the place of this separation?
Yeah, there's really no other way to explain that than to get into my own story a little bit. first began struggling with lust, and I'm just going to say lust at first because at this point it wasn't pornography, but probably about fifth grade is when it first started to kind of worm its way into my life, and it progressively got worse. In through junior high, then I think high school is where I actually started to discover pornography. All this time, I knew God. I had a relationship with God. I loved God. I actually, in 8th grade, I began even preaching and serving God in that way.
So there was a call on your life to ministry.
Absolutely.
And you loved the Lord. You were in church. But at the same time, this kind of duplicity was emerging in your life where your sexuality was being born and you were beginning to struggle with that more and more, which, by the way, I think is common to man, right? I mean, every young boy becomes a man. His body is changing. We go through puberty. A boy's getting hair on his body where there's never been hair before. He gets acne. His voice is changing. Hormones are beginning to surge in his body. Testosterone is escalating. He's beginning to become a sexual creature as God intended. And so many young men begin to struggle with their sense of their sexual self and who am I and what do I do with this and where do I go with this energy that's in me and what I'm feeling. And so you're a young man who's beginning to struggle with your sexual self.
Yeah, absolutely. I was, there were other things going on in my life when it first started to really take a hold on me. That even though I had a relationship with the Lord, there was some tension there. There was some difficulty where I started trying to find comfort in the wrong places, and all I knew is I liked the way that it felt. I liked the way I felt. When I was lusting, and I'll concentrate on that word because, like I said, it started off with JCPenney magazines, and just there's something about this was wrong. I knew it was wrong, but I liked it. I liked the way it felt, and it was secret, and I just kept indulging in that, and it just grew and really began to take root. So even though I was coming back to God in repentance and I was talking to him about it, I kind of had this cycle in my life where I kept failing in this area. And through high school, God convicted me to start confessing it, to talk to other people besides him about it.
Which is pretty amazing, by the way, because most men, so many men struggle with these issues, internet porn and compulsive masturbation and all these things, and it's shame-oriented, and so the average man is scared to death to disclose to anyone about this struggle, reluctant to tell a friend, reluctant to even talk to his pastor about it. So kind of like Adam and Eve, we tend to hide in the bushes. We don't want somebody to see what we've done wrong. And so that's pretty awesome. And I think it speaks to the fact that you're a very good man with a very good heart. And there was a calling on your life to ministry, and you love God. And here you are struggling. So you have this intuitive sense, I need to get some help. I need to talk to somebody. So you were trying in your own way to reach out and communicate with somebody like, hey, what do I do with this?
Right. I was trying to do what I felt like God was telling me to do. And I mean, I think it was vital. It was important. I will say I was disappointed with the results because it seemed like I referenced this a little bit earlier, but every person I told seemed to kind of say, "Yeah, me too," and not that was, in one sense it was encouraging because you find out the sin that was secret. You're not alone.
You're not a freak show. There's other people who are having the same issues.
In Scripture are clear about that. Sin is common. There's no sin that's not common among man. So it should have been no surprise. But there's that little bit of comfort that, hey, I'm not weird. I'm not the only guy who's struggling with this. On the other hand, I found myself in these relationships with men where we're going to hold each other accountable. and then we both screw up and we don't want to talk about it. And so those accountability relationships just kind of fizzled out and never really got where they needed to go. So it just remained a struggle all throughout high school. I went to Bible college at St. Louis Christian College. That's where I met my wife. And it was still a struggle. As Jamie and I began to get involved, we got to the point where there was one night, I think we had been maybe kissing or something, and if I remember correctly, I think I got a little inappropriate towards her, and she seemed okay with it. But when it was all done, it didn't go too far, so to speak. I mean, anything's too far, but regardless, I knew that my sin and what had been doing in my life was now affecting this young woman who I was beginning to love. And I was really broken up about it. And Jamie had no clue why. So I was in the car, I was really upset, and it wasn't making sense to her.
This is immediately after you guys had been involved with each other.
Yeah, like I said, I think we had just been kissing, and maybe my hand grew upside somewhere where it shouldn't have, something. And like I said, I was beaten up about it because now there's this other woman that, it's not just me anymore.
Right. So you get upset, and she's like confused, like, holy cow, why are you so upset? So what did you tell her?
Yeah, so she would not get out of the car until I told her what was wrong. And I finally confessed to her that I've had this struggle for much of my life with pornography. I mean, at that point, I was probably in my late teens, so for about half of my life, I had been struggling with pornography. And she was very understanding. I think we prayed in the car that night, and in the back of both of our minds, we were most likely going to get married, and that was going to take care of the problem. So we continued to date. By the grace of God, we avoided intercourse, although the lust and everything in me, things were inappropriate multiple occasions. But
when you said a moment ago, you guys were planning on getting married and that would take care of the problem, that was very naive. I think it's something that so many of us think, well, when I get married, I know in our situation, which, some of our story, Sherry and I together, and what a disaster the early years of our marriage were. And I thought the same thing. Well, when I get married, my sex problem will be solved because I'll be married, and then I can have all the sex I want because I'll have a wife, and it'll be legal sex, even in the eyes of God. God can't even get mad at me because this is sex with my wife. And how does that work out for most people? It's like it turns out that marriage is a lot of work and relationship is difficult, and for Sherry and I, sex was a total disaster, literally from our honeymoon. So as it turns out, more often than not, marriage does not solve the sexual issues in our life. Yeah.
Jamie and I are one more example of that, without a doubt. There is this idea that I think what it boils down to is part of you believes that the lust issue is just about not being able to have sex, and the lust issue is so much more. It's so much deeper.
That's so good, Kris. Yeah.
So yeah, we got married, and now
one other thought I wanted to share. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting, but it's just occurring to me. Then what happens is marriage doesn't necessarily solve the sexual issues in your heart and life. And really what marriage does is it exposes the issues that have probably lived in your heart and life for way too long that you've never, ever dealt with. And we're naive enough to think that marriage is going to fix it. But really all marriage ends up doing is exposing the issues that live in you that you've never dealt with and that God is after to try to change and bring healing and redemption to your life.
Yeah, I'd say that's absolutely true. Yeah, the lust didn't go away.
Even
Like
though you were married.
even though I was married, I mean, as you mentioned, we did find that marriage was harder than we thought it was going to be. I think every young couple gets told by older couples, marriage is a lot of work, and every young couple in the back of their mind thinks, this is special. This is different than
Right,
everybody
right.
else. But as we got married and began our lives together, we found out that it was tough. There were a lot of fights that first year. Just getting used to living with each other. Just the two of you becoming one. It's not this instantaneous bliss. There is a struggle as you figure out what that means for you as a couple. And one of my responses to the struggle, because it was stressful, it was difficult, there were fights. I don't like that kind of thing. And very quickly, I began to retreat back to old habits. There was a way I comforted myself when I was upset. It was pornography, masturbation. It was the way, when I indulged in that lustful thinking, that was kind of the escape, right?
Right.
That's what that sin began to represent. At this point in my life, it was a full-fledged addiction. I went to that when I felt like I needed some sort of escape. And I found myself in this situation within the context of my marriage where I felt like I needed some escape. So where did I go? I went to where I had been going for years. So now, even though I'm married, my lust problem hasn't gone away. I'm just now hurting another individual in addition to myself because
Right.
I've got a wife now.
Right. So it turns out that your struggle with lust, your struggle with masturbation and pornography followed you into your marriage, and you continued to struggle with these issues even though you're married now.
Right. And that same pattern I had before marriage continued, but now Jamie's in the mix with me, and she's being hurt. So as I would confess my sin to her now and to God, and I would do okay, but then I'd mess up. And sometimes when I messed up, there'd be a period of hiding, which would hurt her even more. And then eventually God would convict me, or I'd get caught, one of the two, and the confession would come out, and I would do okay for a while, but the pattern kept repeating itself within the context of our marriage.
So this becomes a cycle now.
Yeah.
It's a cycle that's repeating itself over and over again. You act out, you look at porn, Jamie catches you, or you confess it to her. She's hurt. You promise I won't do it again. In a short matter of time, you do it again. You get caught again. So over and over again, you guys are kind of stuck in this very difficult place, and it's becoming more and more of a dilemma in your marriage.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I was afraid to even promise I wouldn't do it again because I didn't. It had been this cycle. Remember, followed me from junior high onward. So I didn't even have that faith to be able to say I'm not going to do this again. I really struggled. All I could muster was I'm sorry, I'll try.
Right.
And but it just kept going. My wife's heart was hurt through that.
That was my next question. How would you put words to how is this beginning to affect Jamie as time is progressing, your lives are unfolding, you have this problem you're struggling with. How is it affecting her?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll start with what I knew early on. I knew early on that it made her question herself, whether she was enough for me, whether she was beautiful enough, what it was, why I kept seeking after things besides her. It just left her feeling small and defeated and not enough.
Right. And that makes total sense, doesn't it? I mean, we see this over and over and over again. When a man is struggling with his sexual self, with pornography, the wife inevitably takes it personally, as if it's her fault. If I was only prettier, if I like sex more, if I look different, if I was more beautiful, she assumes something's wrong with her, and that's why her husband is doing this.
Yeah, and I would assure her over and over again that those things weren't true, because I knew that my problem was about me and God and sin, and it really had nothing to do with her. But even though I would tell her that doesn't change what she's feeling and what she's experiencing. She didn't believe me.
Absolutely, yeah, and that makes sense to me. It occurs to me it's the difference between objectivity and subjectivity. You're being objective. You're trying to explain to her, this isn't about you, it's about me, it's my problem. But she's personally involved in this marriage and in this relationship, and you're her husband, and she lives in her skin, and she has her feelings. So this is she's subjectively involved in this, and it's very hard for her to look at it objectively. And so therefore she's feeling feelings. She feels hurt probably. She feels confused. She feels rejected. She feels like she isn't pretty enough. And so it makes total sense to me that this would really deeply and profoundly affect your wife.
Right. So over the years, she began to seek attention elsewhere, and she had found another man who was not willing, but who was telling her things that counteracted what my addiction. So my addiction left her feeling not enough. She found another man that was complimenting her and paying attention to her, and it made her feel the opposite of that.
Wow. So it sounds like you're describing a kind of vulnerability, not that your sin would justify her sin, but the dilemma of your marriage was creating an environment that was creating this kind of vulnerability in her, this struggle, and all of a sudden here's this other man coming into the landscape of your lives, and he's like paying attention to her and saying nice things to her.
Right. There's no doubt that my sin left my wife exposed. And the enemy took advantage of that.
Wow. That's so powerful, Kris.
But yeah, so she began to get involved with this other man. I actually found out about it just a few months after it started, and I confronted him and her.
By the way, this is a man that you're acquainted with in the context of the church, right?
Absolutely. We hung out with him and his wife, and his family, and there was a friendship there, no doubt. And like I said, I confronted them both with forgiveness, with love, but I demanded that he tell his wife, that we tell the leaders in the church. We were just I'd lived this in my life, this sin. So I knew what was going on. So I knew what to do. We expose it to the light. We talk about it. We put it out there. We forgive each other, and we move on. And so that's what I tried to initiate, and I thought it worked. When it all went out to the light, Jamie seemed repentant. He seemed repentant.
So you're thinking this profoundly difficult episode of your life is behind you now.
Absolutely. And my very first thought was, maybe not my very first thought, but very, very quickly into this process, one of the things that occurred to me, maybe God's using this to finally get me to overcome my sin issue and my addiction. And so right. I thought maybe this is what I needed for this to be gone. Right?
I see. Kris, if I could interrupt you there, we're coming to the close of this episode, so I'm going to have to wrap it up here for today. But if you're intrigued by Kris's story, I know that I am. His wife is involved in an affair with another man. And if you'd like to hear more of this story and kind of how this unfolds in their lives, make sure that you come back and join us for our next episode. So God bless you guys. Thank you for tuning in today, and I'll look forward to seeing you in our next episode.
Thanks for listening. Visit powerofpurity.org for more resources and information. And if this podcast has been helpful or encouraging, please invite a friend to listen. Until next time, remember, there's power in purity.